In today's video, we have the latest trade talk around the NHL. We're looking at teams like the Vancouver Canucks, Boston Bruins, Montreal Canadiens, Carolina Hurricanes, and the Anaheim Ducks. We also have news on a couple suspensions, including David Perron and Erik Gudbranson. News on the waiver wire, plus a player in St. Louis that was supposed to be on waivers today, ended up not, and looks like he could end up being traded. The Penguins, Kyle Dubas, the GM, has spoken to the media today, giving a little bit of a vote of confidence to his coach and talking about the direction of the team. Plus, we have lots of other injury and roster moves from around the league. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. We just got word on a short time ago, and there is a dedicated video on the channel, so I'm not going to get into it too in-depth here, but we do have a couple of major suspensions, including Red Wings forward David Perron, who was suspended 6 games for cross-checking to the head of Sens defenseman Artem Zub. Of course, that happened after the whole chaotic scenario with Dylan Larkin passed out on the ice. Perron thought Zub might have been doing it or been the one to put him out because he didn't see what happened and cross-checked him to the head in a retaliatory, crazy kind of way. But at the end of the day, he's pretty stiff penalty here, but it was intent to injure. It was a match penalty given on the play. I think they got this one right. Ultimately, they did say he does have some history of actual retaliatory cross-checks as well. And Columbus defenseman Erik Gudbranson was suspended 1 game. Different scenario, but he felt he received a dirty hit from Nick Cousins of the Panthers. It was called boarding, which is definitely was a boarding call for sure. It was called a major, rescinded down to a minor. Gudbranson went down pretty hard, but then got up and tried to fight Cousins, and he wouldn't fight. So he later in the game jumped him, and it was a one-sided affair. But Cousins again turtled for the second time in the game and wouldn't fight back. So it ended up being one-sided. Gudbranson got kicked out. Now he's suspended another game. Again, justified. Player safety said they understood his frustration and where the anger was coming from, but it doesn't excuse him from retaliating the way that he did. We also got news from the NHL waiver wire today, including 2 players placed on waivers. The Penguins placed defenseman Dmitry Samorukov on waivers for the purpose of being assigned to the minors, as well as the Chicago Blackhawks placing forward Boris Katchouk on waivers as well, both with the intention of being assigned to the minors to get more playing time. There was also supposed to be another player on waivers, according to Jeremy Rutherford, who covers the St. Louis Blues for The Athletic. He had reported a couple of hours ahead of the waiver wire announcements coming down that the Blues were placing Jacob Vrana on waivers. Now, Vrana was a nice pickup last year from Detroit, had a pretty good run, scoring some goals, but this year's been a different story. So far, he's got 2 goals and 6 points in 19 games. His contract, technically, which he signed with Detroit prior to the trade, has a cap hit of $5.25 million. Of course, Detroit retained salary, so the Blues are only on the hook for the cap hit of $2.6 million, which is still a lot of money for a player who's not producing. But based on what was coming down from the newswire here with Rutherford reporting this, and then apparently what we learned later was that the Blues had reached out to speak with Vrana's agent to inform her what was going to be taking place. And then when the waiver wire news came out, Vrana was not on it. So they assume obviously that they've made some other arrangements or talked this through. There was some belief that in the last few days that there was a lot of trade talk around him, but that the Blues kind of got a little antsy that they weren't getting anywhere, that there wasn't much of a market for him, which you can imagine. Obviously, most teams aren't going to take a player struggling like that. But at the same time, St. Louis took a chance on him before, and it did work out, at least on a short-term basis. But we'll see. But Jacob Vrana's time in St. Louis is likely coming to an end here soon. I would suspect that he likely could get dealt. I mean, if he didn't go on waivers, you'd think that maybe they, had picked up on some trade talk. Maybe they gave permission to his agent to speak to other teams. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm reasonably confident he won't be in St. Louis much longer. It's probably debatable at this point if he even plays additional games. They might want to leave him sitting out, which he's been a healthy scratch a fair bit anyway lately, to make sure that the asset is protected. So if they do find a trade, that there's no injuries or anything of that nature coming up. So we'll see what happens with Vrana, but time in St. Louis could come to an end. Some injury updates. The Penguins have announced that Brian Rust is week to week. We knew he's been out for a little while. We got a little bit more of an update there. Lars Eller is apparently ill, kind of considered day to day. And of course, like as I mentioned as well, the Penguins GM Kyle Dubas felt the need to speak to the media today and kind of talk and address the lack of success the Penguins are having this year. Gave head coach Mike Sullivan a vote of confidence. Said that, he has the utmost, confidence that Sullivan is the right guy, not only for now, but for the future as well. No, it's no secret that Sullivan had a pretty good relationship with ownership and was involved to some degree with helping them find a new GM. So I don't really think there's too many people who thought the coach might be in trouble, but as Dubas alluded to, when you have teams that start to struggle and when they're expected to be in and around the playoff mix and they're not, then a lot of people do look to the coach and wonder if it's time for a change of voice, change of direction in that regard. And he wanted to say that he didn't think that was the case, that Sullivan's done a fine job, and that if the team's not performing well and there's not enough depth or what have you, that it's any issues with the roster, that's a Dubas problem, not a Sullivan problem. And obviously said that he was going to be, doing what he can to try to fix things and make the team better. Of course, they have Jesse Puljujarvi on a tryout. There's no clear direction on timelines when they're going to decide if they sign him or not. Obviously, he has to sign a contract before he can play. I don't know if they'll get him to sign like an amateur tryout and play a game or two in the American Hockey League. Hard to say what the full direction is. For right now, he's just getting acclimated to being in a team environment again, going through some practices, and then they'll decide from there. But the Penguins definitely underperforming for sure. Difficult to say where things go from here, but I would say that we're probably going to see a trade or some moves to the roster long before we'll see a change behind the bench. In Detroit, we get some announcements. They did recall Zach Aston-Reese, Jonathan Berggren, and Austin Czarnik on an emergency basis because they were down some players. They did officially place Dylan Larkin on the IR after the unfortunate incident that happened against the Senators the other night. Because he's on IR, will be out for at least a 7-day period. But we don't know more than that. We know head coach Derek Lalonde did say that he spoke to him and he's been in touch. He seems to be doing okay and getting better, but with no clear word yet on exactly what the injury is or when he'll be back. Lalonde didn't want to get into it. He said that he wanted to leave everything private for Larkin. So we'll see if we learn anything more. Klim Kostin also retroactively placed on IR to December 7th, and JT Compher retroactively added to IR back to December 5th. So the Red Wings certainly have their fair share of injuries right now, and we'll see they're on a bit of a road trip playing the Stars tonight. We'll see how they make out. Boston, of course, has got McAvoy and Zacha both considered day-to-day. Those are, a couple important pieces if they can't go. The Blackhawks of Jerard Fagerberg is on injury reserve as well. So those are your injury updates for now. We also learned that Kyle Connor likely heading to IR, hasn't been officially placed there just yet. I don't expect at this point, because it's been about 24 hours, any kind of supplemental discipline for Ducks forward Ryan Strome, but there was a knee-on-knee collision between Strome and Connor in last night's game between the Jets and the Ducks. Strome does go in with his leg kind of extended. Ultimately, definitely a penalty. I don't think there's intent, but it's still a little bit reckless in my opinion. Connor was definitely injured, needed help to get off the ice. We don't have a clear response from the Jets yet on the extent of the injury. He was having an MRI today. We may know something the next day or so. Most likely a ligament strain of some sort, but hopefully it's not too serious and he won't be out too long. I mean, some of those knee injuries, it can be a couple of weeks or 1 week, and sometimes it can be several months depending on the extent. So we'll see where that goes. That could be a big blow for the Jets, who now find themselves in first place in the Central Division. The Vancouver Canucks were officially informed, according to Rick Dhaliwal, that they are out on Ethan Bear. We talked yesterday that the Washington Capitals, according to information from Saturday Headlines and Chris Johnson of TSN, that the Caps appear to be the leading contender to sign the right-shot defenseman. But Vancouver was very interested. That's where he played last and was recovering from injury and rehabbing in the area and had been in touch with the Canucks before. But ultimately, the Caps have a little bit more flexibility with the salary cap. They can offer more money, more term, and it sounds like that's where he's heading. We don't know that officially. I would expect a decision in the coming days, but Vancouver is out. He's definitely not going there. We know that much for sure. And John Tavares makes his return again to Long Island tonight. He was 2 points away from 1,000 entering the game. Even though he's in year 6 of his contract with the Leafs, he still gets booed heavily. Tonight, of course, same thing. Game starts. Tavares still heavily booed from Islanders fans who still, will give him this treatment every time he comes back. He did register a goal before I started recording this particular video, so I know he's at 999 points. Would he possibly get point 1,000 in the game tonight against his former team, the New York Islanders? I'd love to see the reaction from Islanders fans if he hits such a major milestone while visiting there to play the Islanders. It was 3-2 for the Islanders at the point that I started to record. Hopefully I didn't miss point 1,000 while I was here talking to the camera. Some trade talk around the NHL. The Vancouver Canucks, of course, still looking to make some moves because of the fact that they're not able to get Ethan Bear. Rick Dollywall is reporting that another right-hand shot defenseman that they're looking at is former Canuck Jalen Chatfield, currently playing with the Carolina Hurricanes. He's in the final year of his contract, making under $1 million, so very desirable contract in that sense. They are talking, apparently, the agency for Chatfield and the Canes on a potential extension, but word is that they're not real close, and at this point, it's not clear if they're going to get things worked out. So Vancouver has interest in bringing back the former right shot defenseman back to Vancouver, where he spent a number of years before, somebody they're very familiar with, and would be a nice upgrade to add some depth on the right side of their blue line. So obviously, like I said, they were leaning towards getting Ethan Bear, but they basically needed him to sign for like $1 million for the rest of this year, and then maybe do an extension after because of their cap situation. But if he can get, especially where he's had some injuries, getting more term and more money now up front, he's going to have to take that. It's just understandable business decision, but Chatfield might be somebody they turn their attention to if things don't work out for him to stay with the Hurricanes. Boston Hockey Now reporter Jimmy Murphy talking about the Bruins in the latest article for him, saying how they can use some toughness and some more grit, especially with the absence of Milan Lucic. We don't know if or when Lucic will be back with the Bruins. Signed a 1-year deal. Now he's in legal trouble. He's on an indefinite leave of absence from the team. I believe he was seeking some help after getting himself into legal trouble after a domestic incident with his spouse. So they could use somebody to be that type of role in the team, according to Murphy. He wonders if they would take a look at Patrick Maroon in Minnesota. Now, of course, Minnesota was on a bit of a tailspin prior to the coaching change, and were looking like they were going to miss the playoffs. Now they've got a good streak going, or at least they did. They have kind of come back down a little bit under John Hines here, but they played much better. And, they're certainly far from being out of the playoff spot considering how early it is in the season. I have no doubt that Maroon will definitely get interest not only from Boston, but from other teams as well if the Wild are not in the playoff mix and Bill Guerin chooses to make some deals at the deadline and sell off a few assets. There's not a lot there in Minnesota that are on expiring deals that they could easily sell for draft picks for future. So Maroon was one of those players, though. I can see him being a good fit in Boston as well. So we'll have to see where that goes. I do agree with the reporter here that it would be a good fit, and they will likely want to add that type of player, and he just might be their guy should things work out. Now, yesterday I was talking about the fact about Montreal and their goaltending situation. It's looking more and more likely that a Jake Allen trade might actually come to be. I mean, we've gone back and forth over the last number of weeks on which goalie was most likely to go. For a while, it was looking like Montembeault. Then he got the contract extension. Then it was looking like maybe they are going to take a chance and put Primo through waivers, but he's played a lot better as of late. He's still young, and teams are looking out there, and they know for a fact there's teams that like him. So I don't think they really want to do that, and it kind of leaves Jake by the process of elimination and being the more likely guy to go. He's a little bit older. Obviously would be a good guy to have around to help the younger goaltenders. There's no doubt he could be a good role model and still finish out that contract. And then based on an interview he did with Montreal reporters, he said that he'd love to be able to stay in Montreal and fulfill that contract and see things through. That's what he wanted to do when he signed the extension. So there's definitely interest for him to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a business, and he understands that. And he has a little bit of trade protection in his contract, but there's only 7 teams he can block. So we'll see. According to, now I was talking yesterday, I said to look to a team like Carolina because of how they've been on a losing streak. Their main goaltender is hurt, probably done for the season, and the other goaltenders are not getting the job done right now. Well, today there's more reports, this one from fourthperiod.com and Dave Pagnona, talking about the same sort of thing. So obviously people with connections out there are kind of viewing things the same way I was talking about yesterday. So I want to bring it up here again. There's definitely more to this report than just my opinion. But obviously the Carolina Hurricanes also looking to move Tony DeAngelo. He's making $1.6 million. They have around $2 million available in cap space now. You add to 1.6 if they can move Tony, then that kind of gives them enough room to be able to take a contract like a Jake Allen on. The Hurricanes have a good team, but they've been struggling. They lost 4 consecutive road games on their current road trip. They have a couple left against Ottawa and Detroit, looking to bounce back and finish strong. But right now, they're not even guaranteed to be a playoff team. Like the Canes and Devils both are lower in the standings than expected. Goaltending certainly had its role here to play as to why. So whether it be a guy like Jake Allen, now this article from the fourthperiod.com also references John Gibson in Anaheim being a potential target. Gibson's got more term, makes more money. Maybe longer term is a better solution, but at the same time, a lot more difficult to squeeze in under the cap and probably going to come at a bigger price tag. So to me, if it's down to these two guys, not to say that there couldn't be other goalies in the mix, but if it's these two are the options, Jake Allen's the better option, better bang for your buck, better value, cheaper, good veteran guy. He's got a Stanley Cup on his resume. There's lots to like there. So we'll see how things go, but we very well could see the Hurricanes and Montreal Canadiens hook up. Obviously, it was kind of fun to watch their banter back and forth with those offer sheets for a few years. Of course, different regime in Montreal now, but we could see them finally hook up on a trade after all that time. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.